Alright, so my last video, which is no longer up, was a bust. The sound came out awful, and I just couldn't have something with that low of quality. So apologies if you didn't get to see it, but I've got some more games for you today. I'm very quickly going to touch on the changes that I discussed in the last one since that video is not up. Basically just pointing out cards that are in the deck and which ones aren't. Terminus has been out for a while, but now Condescend is out and Future Sight is out. I have County Gem, Batterskull replaced Terminus. County Gem is in where Future Sight was. Um, uh, Condescend has become Night's Whisper. I took out a basic island and went back to 4, from 4 to 3 rather, and actually reduced the land count to 30 and put Mox Opal as a land slot. I think it's fairly reliable in this deck. And I also took out Expedition Map and I put Weathered Wayfarer in its place. And Weathered Wayfarer only requires one land to be operated. That land does have to be white, of course, but it's a little bit more user-friendly with less lands in the deck, I think. And it certainly has a much higher upside potential. And I think in these games you'll see that the Weathered Wayfarer does some good work. So I played these games. So I played a series against Keep Flying, who is one of the featured streamers in my channel, or YouTubers. And that was a series that I did manage to win 2-0, but his deck is good, and his deck is not finished either. So as he continues to improve his deck, I'm sure that we'll have some other good games. For the rest of these, I have been on a winning streak, finally, after making these changes. So let's take a look and see what happened in some of these games. I'm starting with Aspar here, and Aspar is playing. Let me just close this folder here, close this folder here where my videos get saved, and we'll get started. So Aspar is playing something? Magic? Yeah. Okay, Teferi. And of course I am playing planning to keep with a hand that looks this good. He's trying to decide whether or not he wants to mulligan. So let's see how this plays out. I don't remember exactly how these games played out because they're from the other night, but I do remember I did pretty well. So anyway, so I go ahead and set up for a counterspell, and since he's not doing anything, I'm not doing anything. After combat, however, since I have Tomb into Talisman without lowering my defenses, I go ahead and play the Talisman, and now I have the potential to cast Vampiric and a counterspell. He gives me a target for a counterspell. This card will allow him to recover from his mulligan, of course. So I use Muddle since I can save a counter for something else. And end of turn, Vampiric. And he has Mental Misstep. So very nice. He was otherwise quite dead there. So I just go with the backup plan of Batterskull. He plays Rings of Brighthearth, and I figure it's okay since he can only have up to 4 dual lands in a mono blue deck. And I mean fetch lands, and he hits one. So that's unfortunate because the Rings is now going to function as a mana source. But I am at least evening the life totals out with Batterskull and slowly transitioning from even to ahead. However, because I just spent 4 life, I'm actually going to even the life totals out again. So basically I'm spending his life to use my cards. So Night's Whisper was quite nice there. Got me into a scroll rack. And that Wasteland. Alright, so you got to double search off Rings. That's unfortunate. And then he gets Muddle. So now he gets to double search with Muddle, because that is actually a activated ability. He's activating the ability of Muddle. So he fetches Impulse and Grim Monolith. So now I'm pegging him for a combo, although Grim maybe just be a way to get Teferi into play. So we'll take a look at 2 new cards. Draw a land, which I'll use to shuffle away the Wasteland on top of the deck, since it doesn't appear to be particularly useful. Oh, is this game going to bug out? I hope not. Alright, and then I decide that Breya is better than Duretti. I can deal with Rings for a little bit longer. So he gets down Grim, Impulses. He's probably looking to put together infinite mana here, so I just got to watch for that. Plays Trinket. That's fine. I can kill Trinket Mage, and I can stop the thing he goes and fetches, potentially. He fetches Voltaic Key, and I top deck a Mind Twist. So we're going Twisty. And he delays it. So I just decide... so this is so funny. So he delays the Mind Twist, right? And I let it go, and then I spent, and the whole thing was that Mind Twist, as I recall now, was actually a complete like bait spell. I didn't care what he did as long as he didn't actually do anything that affected the board. And this is why. I sack the scroll rack and the tapped artifact that I used for Mind Twist to shrink his creature, and then I get to attack him for 4, 8, 9, 10 mana, or 10 damage, taking him to 4, and then with exactly, well, I have extra 1 extra, but with the mana in play, I can then deal 3 to him and 3 to him. I have 1 extra. I have 5 artifacts and 5 mana. I only need 4 and 4. So he's actually about to take 16 damage, and just like that, he's dead. So it's one of the crazy things about Breya is that it's just super, super, super aggressive and excellent at closing the game out quickly. And that's exactly what happens in that game. So here we've got a game against Flock, who is running, I don't really give a Flock, some kind of mono-white creature, Odric. And my hand is absurd against anybody. So I'm going to go first turn Mana Crypt into Chromatic Lantern, into Tithe for 2 cards very soon, I think. So he gets, I don't know, a creature who grows when he plays humans in a Crusade. Alrighty. Let's go get some lands. And we get islands, of course. Losing the flip. Finding myself a Trinket Mage, so I'm going to go ahead and Trinket. I could go after something else here, but I'm going to go greedy, just get a little bit more mana. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to go get that Mox Opal I put in the deck, which allows me to play Confidant, and if nothing particularly devastating happens, then I can Mystical Tutor rather than Force of Will. So he makes a big 4/4. I don't care too much about that. I don't even bother Mystical Tutoring because I'm doing fine here. Because of the fact that Breya is my commander. So I find Brainstorm, and I Brainstorm away creature removal against White Weenie. And then immediately kill his flyer. I know I'm sitting on my Breya is 5/5 thanks to Crusade, by the way. So I'm sitting on this gigantic commander. I've got Force of Will and about to untap, and I'm drawing 2 cards per turn. So of course I set my cards up so I wouldn't take too much damage. And I'm just going to chill out here and then Mystical Teachings and tutor my way to victory. But first, let's grab some mana. So I'm at 9. I'm going to keep an eye on that. Right, he gets some guys, no big deal. I'm going to fetch end of turn, and I'm going to break his back, upkeep, take some more damage, and there we go. Grim Monolith pays for a Rift, and we go face smashing. Taking my opponent to 21, and I can now, I even have the Grim and the Thopter to gain some life and still, he replays Crusade, doing me a favor so I can hit harder. So I can gain some life here and still be totally fine. And as a matter of fact, at the end of his turn, I sack Mox Opal on my commander to kill his Solemn Simulacrum. So if you're that guy, you've got to feel pretty bad because of what I'm about to do. So the reason I was killing my, because I had Yawgmoth's Will, I was killing Grim Monolith and Mox Opal as quickly as I could for some kind of value play, specifically so that I could will, then recast Mana Crypt from the graveyard, use it to cast Grim from the graveyard, generating more mana, play the Mox Opal for free, and I was going to produce, play a land as well, and so I was actually going to produce a ton of mana right here because I killed my Mana Rocks, funny enough. So anyway, it went very well. It was kind of part of the setup. Keep Flying jumped into a game here after making a few changes where he wanted to test some of the changes, I believe. So we had this game here, but unfortunately my draw is absurd. He's playing Marin lately, so that's his new deck. It's certainly, if you aren't going to play blue, it's probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest, non-blue commanders. But so he is off to the races with a ton of mana, but I got turn 2 Batterskull, and it's kicking its teeth in pretty quickly. 30 life. There isn't a ton of time, but holy smokes, look at that mana development. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 mana in play. He goes for Contamination, so I just float Latent Response and disenchant it. Because I kind of want my lands to produce more than just black. Sometimes I might be able to ignore that with enough artifacts, but this time I didn't think so, because it would cause the Ancient Tomb not to produce black, which I actually tested. I let him play it and tested it. Because I wasn't sure, but it causes the Ancient Tomb to only produce 1 black, so it would have set me back a turn on Karn. All right, so I mean, I have Breya here running, but I'm just gonna Humility in play, or in hand rather, but I'm just gonna use Breya to kill as many of his guys as possible until it's time to pull the trigger on the humility. Once he plays his commander, it's time. He's down to only 2 cards in hand. Um, and I have active Karn. So what I was going to do is humility here, and then Karn away. Most likely Guy's Cradle and just leave him sitting on 2 mana, or potentially just remand. Most likely, yeah, I would have just hit the Cradle and just let him stuck on 2 mana. He would have taken Karn down to 1. Then I go hand from then on and throw down a Breya to block. It's over. He knows it, so he scoops it up. But my draw was pretty gross, and I had tons of life to work with thanks to the Batter's Call. Always good when you have a counter in your hand you can play for most of the game and don't need to. So this guy's playing Ulamog, mono color, so you'd think he'd have tons of mana rocks and be really fast, but and maybe he does, but he isn't this fast. In fact, I don't see any mana rocks coming out of his hand. And if you're playing mono color, you pretty much are saying that you are, you know, that's the only game plan you have is the mana rock as fast as you can and get things going. So, okay, so he finally gets 1 down. He gets Mana Vault into Solemn for wastes, I guess. Yeah, okay, that's something. Well, meanwhile, I am going to continue developing with Jace and just doing totally absurd things, getting unbelievable amounts of mana into play. I actually don't have 2 islands, so even though I'm holding Shackles, I can't even steal a Solemn Simulacrum, but that's okay. How about if I just steal all of his mana sources instead with a Winter Orb? So the colorless should be playing tons of Mana Rocks deck is getting crushed by Winter Orb. Now, he did get a Basalt Monolith, and I have to watch out for the chance that he could produce infinite mana, so I plus up Jace and tuck a Gilded Lotus away for him, I believe. And then that allows me, affords me the time to play Breya, which will now allow me to start drawing off of Jace again. I still haven't hit an island, so I'm hoping to find an island. And I think, you know what, forget it. I'm not even going to mess around. I'm just going to kill his blocker rather than try to find an island and steal it. And it's quite fortunate I do that because I do not find an island. So Malx Opal into Copy Artifact on Thran Dynamo. I'm sitting pretty on up to 14 mana if the Winter Orb weren't in play. But still a very respectable 12. So my opponent plays Duplicate, I'm just going to kill it before it triggers. Don't care at all about that. And somehow I'm going to find the mana to recast my commander. And with my opponent's realization that my commander has basically gone infinite and he's stuck under the ability to untap 1 land per turn, my opponent scoops it up. Well, meanwhile, of course, I'm jacing. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. Never had to play a counterspell that game either. All I had to play was Preordain. I searched for cards and played Mana Rocks. Other than Jace, who I never used to bounce anything, I basically just played Mana Rocks and Winter Orb. And you know what? All you need sometimes is Mana Rocks and Winter Orb. All right, so especially when the opponent's draw is really bad. All right, so this game here, I had a 2-game series against this gentleman. I believe it's a gentleman playing Keychains 100 there. And I think what ended up happening, if I remember correctly, is we play this game out, and then my opponent switches to his serious deck. So in the first game, I have tons of advantage, and I'm using Tithe Tricks to produce card advantage right off the bat. And I think about Mystical Tutoring there for Mana Drain. Decide not to because I plan to Leyland and cast Fabricate and then figure out what I'm going to do with Mystical Tutor because I may want a Mystical just for Mind Twist at that point. But my opponent just decides he's gonna scoop and jump back in with a serious deck that's gonna kick my butt. So here we go. He is playing mono red Zergo Bell Striker. I don't quite see how this is going to be good, but okay. I lead off with Strip Mine on a hand that really requires me to hit a second land because I only have Ancient Tomb as my second land, and he Strip Mines it. Plays Partick Miner to prevent me from playing a land, so I use my Ancient Tomb to Winter Orb him, but I can't play Wooded Foothills. Luckily, I top decked one, so now I'm in a tough spot because I need blue, black, white, and red, so I decide I'm going to go for black and red. I Demonic Tutor and go get Soul Ring. And my opponent plays Destruction on my Winter Orb. It's pretty clear he's playing some kind of land denial deck. He plays Icefall. Destroy target artifact or land. So my turn, I develop a little bit further. He exiles a land with Petrovark. So, however, I did find time to sneak a Batterskull into play. So I decide now that the play is going to be Fabricate for Mox Opal. Mox Opal into Stoneforge Mystic. Look how often I'm fetching Mox Opal. I'm so glad I listened to Brian about this card and just forced it into the deck. It is a better deck for that. And then I was all set up to win the game after I untapped and my opponent Wheel of Fortunes. Finds Expedition Map and an Avalanche Riders. Expedition Map, of course, threatening to go fetch a Strip Mine. So as for my protection mana, I leave a tap land untapped and a Mox Opal. My opponent lets Avalanche Riders dies and uses it to pay for Icefall, a very cool combo. Mana Crypts into Valakut for some reason over Strip Mine, and then attempts to kill my Batterskull. I will have none of that. Fortunately, I drew a Mana Drain, and that is going to power me up pretty good for an upkeep. Enlightened Tutor into Jitte, Jitte equip, and smash. Now I can kill Petrovark if I want to. Still my main phase, so I go ahead and Tutor, and I was thinking about actually taking Kalni Gem there, but I decided I'm going to take Scroll Rack because I kind of want to find a way. I could have taken Fact or Fiction as well, but I like Scroll Rack with 2 lands in hands and a fetch. And then my opponent plays Dwarven Landslide, destroys 2 target lands. And so the reason I didn't kill Petrovark is I'm waiting. I'm going to keep Jitte counters, and then if I needed to. So here was the thing. On the top of my deck was it was either Mana Leak or Remand. And so the plan was, if my opponent made a backbreaking play, one that I couldn't, so like I ignored the Dwarven Landslide, but if he'd played a play that I was scared of, what I was going to do is, like, for example, something that killed artifacts, like kill my Batterskull. Then what I was going to do is going to kill Petrovark, and then it would trigger the return effect of my Ancient Tomb, which was exiled. So then the Ancient Tomb would have popped into play, and I would have tapped it for 2, use 1 to Scroll Rack into the counter, the Mana Leak, I believe it was, and then 1 blue off of the Opal to Mana Leak it. So that was my like secret tech play, where I was just hiding the card, and I figure if he did nothing, that end of turn I probably would have just Scroll Racked anyway. I probably would have just killed Petrovark and Scroll Rack, but I didn't want to kill it early and give him the best possible target for his LD. I wanted to save it as a trick, as in a trick that if you happen to have, like, say, Ruination or something, I could always fetch enough land to counterspell. So that was kind of how that played out. And anyway, Keychains unfortunately did not get there with his deck, despite having killed a land on turn 1 while I only held 2 lands in hand, and then proceeding to kill multiple lands and preventing me from playing them. Just did not get there. All right, so Aisha, boy, it makes that song, that old song from the 90s pop in my head. Anyway, so black, white, blue, and look at this sweet little top deck. I keep a risky keep, and the top card of my deck is Weathered Wayfarer. So to make it even more risky, I'm going to pause for a second. Against red, white, black, so the 3 removal colors, somehow Weathered Wayfarer lives. So I'm able to, and then I luck into a crypt, so I'm able to actually Wayfarer into Strip Mine. So let's say we kind of work Wayfarer puts in this game. Use a Strip Mine to play Winter Orb. So Orb is going to slow me down a little bit. My opponent's cards, however, are really, really bad. So I'm not super worried about it. So I go ahead and Strip Mine as white. Play Crucible. I thought about playing Trinket into... so I had another option. I could have played Trinket into Mox Opal and then used Opal to fetch a land. And if you had a non-basic land, I would have done that. But I feel like I didn't need to get greedy here. I'm doing just fine. So Trinket into Fabricate, or into Soul Ring. I Soul Ring, use Soul Ring to power up Fabricate for, yet again, Mox Opal. I Opal for Imperial Seal, and I attack him for 1. He hits me for 2 with the Bushido creatures, and the card I fetched is, yes, Umezawa's Jitte. Strip Mine him, replay the Strip Mine, kill everything else that he's got in play, and we are set. And the funny thing is, if I really, really wanted to, I could just Strip Mine my Tundra and then use Mox Opal to activate Weathered Wayfarer, but I don't see any world where that makes much sense, unless I were to draw Scroll Rack. So like if I were to draw Scroll Rack and I play Scroll Rack and say go, I'd leave Weathered Wayfarer untapped. My opponent plays land and does nothing. Then I just probably strip my own Tundra, fetch a land, scroll rack for 2, and then next turn during my upkeep, I don't know if I'd do it during my upkeep, but yeah, I'd draw, and then I'd be able to scroll rack for 3 pretty quickly. So I'd be, scroll rack for 2, scroll rack for 3, replay the strip mine anyway, not caring at all. And then from there, probably stop activating Wayfarer unless he played another land, in which case I'd start scroll racking for 4 and then 5 and so on and so forth. So by then, I think I would have already found card advantage, like a card generating card to continue to press, or I would have just killed him with my commander. However, he gave up, and totally reasonable for him to do so right there. So this guy, Daniel Brody, if I could remember what he's playing, he's playing Leovold, the enemy. So we'll see how this goes. I did win the critical dice roll, but he plays the very strange main phase Mystical Tutor for Days Undoing, which is essentially a Mind Twist. So I assume he doesn't, a Time Twister. But if he gets Leovold out, it's just game over. Anyway, I strip mine him as a result, and then because I have exactly 4 mana on the next turn, I'm able to make this awesome play of a 1-drop into Sword of Feast and Famine. However, I'm sitting on a counterspell, chilling out, and I use Tithe Trick with Weathered Wayfarer at the end of his turn to test the waters and see if I can get away with equipping the sword and attacking. With the Tithe Trick, I go ahead and actually Wayfarer into Strip Mine because I've already been pressing his land, so I'm going to push it harder. He attempts to actually disallow it, which is totally awesome to see disallow doing this, but I do have a counterspell. In response, he has an activation of a scroll rack, and then he scoops it up. So I was going to draw a card there, hit him for 1, and then on the next turn I could go land, cast my commander, equip sword on Weathered Wayfarer. I wouldn't do it in that order. I'd go equip sword on Wayfarer, attack, draw my cards, see what I got, and then most likely cast my commander next turn was what was going to be the follow-up, and then from there his commander's pretty much useless. But he gave up before we got that far in, and he plays me with another game here, I believe. Is this the same gentleman? Yes. So he goes and gets his best deck, I assume, which is Nin. So Nin is another challenge often, but I have the Blue Mage Killer land tax, and I get to ponder or preordain into a Weathered Wayfarer on top of that. So extremely good here situation for me. I get to tax and draw a City of Brass, so I go Weathered Wayfarer, and he does not want to get strip mined, so he mana drains it, which is totally awesome. I got a 1-drop mana drained. That is not too bad for me at all. So I go ahead and just Imperial Seal and say go. So my assumption was he was going to drain into a big artifact and pass the turn. So I went and fetched Dak Faden in anticipation of that. But he actually had Stranglehold, which prevents me from searching libraries. Thank goodness I actually had Vindicate in hand. So then on his turn he trinkets, and I think, aha, now I'm going to get to steal a Soul Ring. But no, he probably kneels Breya. Without doing that, he can't really make use of his commander, so it's not by any means the wrong play. Anyway, however, I'm able to Demonic Tutor main phase into Soul Ring Winter Orb, and now he's playing a Nin deck underneath a Winter Orb, and that's not, unless you're winning with Nin, that's not a position you want to be in. So he tries to bounce the Winter Orb, and I just deprive the basic island back into my hand. But he gets a Chrome Mox. He finally gets an artifact, and it's only a Chrome Mox. But you know what? That's good enough for me. So I steal that with Dak Faden. He's able to kill Dak. But now I've got this insane advantage running, and I drew Muddle the Mixture. So why don't we go get a scroll rack to go with that there land tax? I won't play it this turn, however, because I would rather play it off the Soul Ring. And he runs out back to basics. Well, unfortunately for him, Winter Orb is a more effective hoser than Back to Basics is. Back to Basics is certainly quite good. The trick is here, I will be tapping and untapping just my 1 island only, and I will tax into other islands repeatedly. And if I need to, I can use the lands. Basically, all of my non-basic lands are kind of like Lotus Petals, but I can't dump them onto the board, which is fine. So I'm just ramping and doing gross land tax scroll rack tricks. And with tax rack running, it's not that hard to find what I'm looking for. I tap Tundra here because I'm able to tithe and then cast Stoneforge Mystic with a white in hand. And then I realized that if I actually just move into the Grim Monolith, I can actually tap out completely. The drawback is almost nothing since I can only untap one land per turn, and I can untap the island. So I'm just going to tap out completely here and equip Sword of Fire and Ice onto Stoneforge. And with a Fire and Ice sword facing down a Nin under a Winter Orb, my opponent finally packs it in. I suppose he could have drawn and seen if he drew a Vandal Blast, but the problem is his Back to Basics prevents him from untapping Shivan Reef. So he's in all kinds of trouble, even though he's got the Mana Crypt to work under the orb. And once I do untap and start swinging and making the connections, I've got 1, 2, 4, 5 mana per turn at minimum that I'm going to be able to make. And of course he doesn't know this, but I'm going to play this, or no, he does know this because of the tithe. I'm going to be able to tax for 2 yet again, and then play Scrubland, and then Mystical Teachings into a counterspell, or Disenchant, or basically whatever I want. So at that point, I think he is quite right to scoop. So Daniel Brody's had enough, and he makes way for Nasy Trons here. Nasy Trons. I'm not sure. I wonder if it's like if you're a kid and you like Megatron, but you misheard what it was called. Maybe you thought it was Nasy Trons. I don't really know. Anyway, this guy's playing Breya, and he has the play, which is good for him. But I have a very strong opening hand. It's got all the goodies that I would like to see, basically, against white. Minus Umezawa's Jit. Oh, wait a minute. And he's got a slow hand, so to make matters worse. So, end of his turn, I go ahead and sack Arid Mesa and just brainstorm here, trying to figure out exactly what I want to do with my cards. I want to hit land drop, so I'm going to go ahead and keep that island. Don't even feel bad since I can shuffle away Karn and I can play the island, use it for a little while, and then just pick it back up. All right, so I flip Remand. I'm able to Swords to Plowshares here and attack for 2. I'm going to sit on Remand and Impulse. There's no point in running out Jitte and not being able to do anything with it. So he goes for a 3/5 that's pretty good. So we'll remand that back to his hand. Draw Wooded Foothills and use Mana Vault to play Kalni Gem. All right, there's the basic back to my hand. So we are now in good shape to equip a Jitte and smash, because if he replays the Angel, I can just play the Duretti. So he actually plays multiple creatures and a creature enhancement spell because this card allows him to play SRAM's Expertise allows him to play a 3-drop, but his creatures aren't white. So I just start clearing out his creatures with Umezawa's Jitte and move into some very absurd mana generation thanks to Dark Confidant. Fetching again, Mox Opal, like I do just about every single game, which is getting very telling as to the power of the card. And then I make a dumb mistake. I don't kill his blocker before attacking, so I actually get no counter on Jitte. I should have Giant Growth and at least gotten 2 counters on my Confidant, or killed his blocker before attacking and hit him for damage and got 2 counters on my Confidant. I did none of those things. But it doesn't matter. I have active Duretti going. I mean, it matters in terms of it was a bad play. But I have Duretti running, so we'll just Duretti away Grim Monolith and smash for damage. What's so great about Duretti killing Mana Vault and Grim is that later on, if I get Yawgmoth's Will, it'll actually just make Will even more powerful. So I go ahead and play Breya here, thinking that his only option now is to clear the board or die. Rather, he just plays Breya, so I shrink it and shrink it again, because it was a little bit big, thanks to his Crusade effect. Strip mine his land, produce a free half of a Breya activation with the ready, smash in and get some Jitte counters running. And at this point, my opponent finally realizes that the game is over. I was going to hit him for, what is this, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I had 15 damage on the board, and he's at 16, and I have Breya. So, yeah, definitely over. It's funny, though, because it's the second person playing white to make Breya into a 5/5 for me. All right, now I've got a game against one of the fans of the channel, Nerdy Digger, which means he probably knows the contents or a very close version of the contents, which should make this extra challenging. So that'll be excellent. But I have a strong hand. 2 lands and lots of 2-drops. He's playing Maelstrom Wanderer, and he's got amazing start with Jiraga. So I'm just going to try to produce cards early, see if I can find those land drops and get something going here. So I do not find any land, and with that, because of that, I'm not going to play Night's Whisper. It really hurt me there on tempo, but as it turns out, it was okay. Since he goes for Sower, I can mana leak it since I didn't play Night's Whisper. Because there was no point in drawing 2 and potentially discarding. Still have not hit a land. This is getting a little ridiculous. I'm going to go ahead and just Merchant Scroll here because there's a certain point where Remand is useless, and we're getting closer and closer to that point. Well, not useless, but certainly not particularly good. My opponent does seem to be having problems finding red, though. He gets Thassa down, so he's now going to have some really good selection. Fortunately, I just hit not only a land, but a Tithe to go with it. And since I have Force of Will here, I'm actually going to go for Crucible while he's mostly tapped out on blue. So that I don't have to worry about missing land drops anymore. And also because that's one artifact away from having a functioning Mox Opal. So my opponent's digging and still has not found red. Probably a good thing for me. He Treachery's Dark Confidant. Because he only has 1 card in hand, I'm just going to let that happen. And then we'll deal with that in a moment. So I may disenchant Treachery, but I decide I have a better option here. So I replay my land first of all, and let's get that Mox Opal on board with the Soul Ring, which allows me to then play Humility with Muddle the Mixture and Force of Will backup. And I could Night's Whisper here, but I can also Tithe and get 2 more cards in my hand. So I might as well sit on a counterspell. And because I could, Humility shuts down Jiraga and Confidant and puts him quite far away from getting his Maelstrom Wanderer. So he finally manages, dumping his hand, he manages to find a Gilded Lotus too and an Ancient Tomb in order to be able to play Maelstrom Wanderer next turn. So let's disenchant the Lotus. Still not able to Tithe because just the way things are going. But I drew, I have Muddle the Mixture. So we are going to Muddle and clink, put the brakes on Wanderer over there. So now all I have to do is just deal with the damage in play, and we got this game, I think. So I'm not going to cast Tithe off of untapped lands. I'm going to use it off the Mox Opal. Well, I thought I was going to. I decided to actually do something a little different. I actually Night's Whisper, and I give up some of my mana to attack his best land and keep him fairly mana suppressed. And the reason I don't play Trinket Mage besides the Humility is that I want to Force of Will with it. Alright, so now I get to Tithe into some more lands and pass the turn. I've actually fetched out the majority of my lands, so I actually have 2 fetch lands there and I'm not using them. My opponent plays Trinket Mage. So I'm taking a ton of damage. It's very kind of gutsy to sit and do, oh yeah, there was 1 more land to fetch. It's very kind of gutsy for me to sit and do nothing here, but I have to trust my deck, and the patience is rewarded when my opponent attacks into War of Invention, which is about to allow me to tap my Winter Orb, and he gives up, I do believe. Slam. So I get to tap my Winter Orb there off the War of Invention, which means that on my turn, Winter Orb will untap. So all the lands I just tapped don't matter in the slightest. I have Force of Will with Trinket Mage and a Remand to all back it up. Plus I have 3 lands in play, so my opponent can't even strip mine me and try to push a spell through. So there's basically nothing he can do about that. And what's insane about Humility, and I've mentioned this before, is if Humility is played after Batterskull's in play, then you end up with a 5/5 with no abilities. But if Batterskull comes into play after Humility, then you end up with a 5/5 with Lifelink and Vigilance. And the reason it's a 5/5 is the germ is actually normally a 0/0, so Humility actually buffs it. It acts like a Crusade and turns it into a +1/+1, so it's a 1/1 germ with no abilities, who then gets equipped and picks up +4/+4 Lifelink and Vigilance. So that's how that works. And so with Humility, Batterskull is actually a combo with Humility, and that's why I was able to cut Terminus and put Batterskull into the deck, is that you've got this Batterskull Humility combo where your opponent's creatures are all garbage and you're smashing their face for 5 and getting 5 life per turn. They can't attack into them because they're going to give you 5 life. Like, the only way my opponent could attack me here is if he had something like 10 creatures. Because then I would take 9 damage. I would block 1 and take 9 damage, and I would die before the lifelink could trigger from Batterskull. But other than him having 10 creatures in play, basically he can't attack. And if he doesn't attack for a single turn, Batterskull will then give me 5 life, and now he needs 14 creatures in play. So it's just a savage combo, and for that reason he sends me a message that says, yeah, you got Batterskull, I'm good. Or, I give up. Basically he said he was not going to give up unless I got Batterskull right there, which was pretty cool, actually. So we got a couple more games, and then I think we are all done with this video. So hopefully you're enjoying yourself. So this is a game against Hazion Tamar. I haven't seen this guy in a million years, but I've got an early potential for a Wayfarer. However, I'm missing white, so I just decide to shuffle it away and play Dark Confidant. I have a little bit of a risky hand here, but all is well. All is well. So I get to play Confidant, and my opponent has Zurin Orban in play, so this Tithe may only get me 1 land, but then he plays a Dawn Treader who fetches land, so I don't know exactly what to think about what's going on over there, but I'm just going to, all my lands produce white here, so I'm just going to cast a Stoneforge, go get myself a Feast and Famine Sword, play a land tax, and then we're going to do a little Tithe tricking. So he plays Sword of the Animist, which allows him to actually fetch basic lands when he attacks, which will now turn on land tax, which is, Jace appreciates it. Alright, so I'm going to Tithe Trick anyway, simply because he has the Winter Orb, and if he wants to respawn to prevent me from getting 2 lands with Tithe, then I want him to have to sacrifice the maximum number of lands possible, which would be about 3 in this case. So he elects not to do that, which is wise. So I get 2 lands plus my fetch, and then I get to tax for 3 more cards. Boom, boom, boom. I think I only take 1 because I really just wasn't planning on going too crazy. Like, I've got stuff to do this game. I'm good. I can get some more cards later. So go ahead and smash him with Sword of Feast and Famine, take a card out of his hand, play Crucible of Worlds, because what I need now is even more mana. I don't play Jace, so the thought process here is I don't play Jace, but I play Crucible, specifically so that I can forbid with buyback whatever his play is, and I figured it'd probably be Hazion, using 2 lands, and then I can just tax another island back into my hand, draw for the turn, and start replaying lands from the graveyard that I just discarded to Crucible. And of course, if I find myself County Gem, I'll replay the basic island, and then I'll just pick them both up. So there's a nice little loop there. But yeah, with the forbid with buyback and the fact that he's getting smashed with my creatures, my commander's potentially going to come down. I'm drawing tons of cards every turn, and he's got basically nothing going on. My opponent scoops a little early, but at a time that is also quite reasonable. And I believe I had 2 games that I tried to play tonight that were going to be interesting, I hoped, but unfortunately they weren't. I will not bother to bore you with the 2 games. It was like I play a card, my opponent sees Breya and concedes, and I don't remember what happened in this, but it was not interesting. So I think we'll call it right there, and hopefully we got a better video, better sound, better picture. That's what I'm trying to do for the channel, and I think I got everything worked out after a whole lot of bugs and a whole lot of frustration. So hopefully we'll never have junk like the last video again. And for those of you that watched it, I do apologize. And that's all I've got tonight. And thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you next time.